Sembra un po' l'Eurovisione e la consegna degli Oscar, che sono in due a presentare. Però questo assolve due funzioni. Una, quello del tutor con l'ansioso. Sapete che la CRUI sta facendo questo corso e quindi abbiamo bisogno, mani sudate, esposizione, e abbiamo il tutor per l'esposizione. La seconda cosa è che... Va bene, grazie. Sud 8. La seconda cosa è che condividiamo, io e il prof, e il piacere enorme io e Paolo, di avere Carmen qui come ospite di questa conferenza e quindi ve lo volevamo esprimere a due voci.
Perché la nostra conoscenza affonda nel tempo, bisogna dirlo, ma è inutile cercare l'evitamento esperienziale. Noi ci siamo conosciuti nel 1983 e quindi sono passati un po' di anni e ci siamo scambiati varie volte, incontri in vari congressi, abbiamo scambiato valori, abbiamo scambiato esperienze. Abbiamo conosciuto Skinner in quell'occasione, B.F. Skinner e molti altri, Murray Sidman. Quindi questo è quello che ci guarda verso il passato. Ma noi adesso guardiamo verso il futuro, perché Carmen in tutti questi anni ha fatto un lavoro eccellente in Spagna ed è diventato un esempio per moltissime persone, noi inclusi. E quindi è con grandissimo piacere che introduciamo Carmen Luciano.
Con un piccolissimo episodio della sua vita, perché la produzione scientifica ve la trovate su Google Scholar, il curriculum sulla sua università di Almeria, ma voi non sapete che Carmen Luciano ha avuto come tutor di PhD B.F. Skinner, il quale alla fine ha scritto una lettera di raccomandazione di Carmen alla sua università, quindi cosa che conserva gelosamente. Quindi è con vero piacere e molto affetto che presentiamo Carmen Luciano.
Good morning, and thank you so much to Paolo and Nani for your presentation. Even I couldn't understand, so I just figured out, you know. But I thank you so much, both of you, for bringing me here today. And I thank you all of you for being willing to be there today, now, listening to someone who don't speak your language. And I would try to do my best. And thank you for the translator, and I will try to do the best I can for you to do the translation. I want to begin just saying thank you again, Nani and Paolo, because it is the first time I am in Milan. And I want to say something about you know, I cannot wait to see your cathedral and the Scala. I love opera. And I want to begin just explaining a personal story about Milan and why I'm feeling now what I'm feeling. And it's that 4 years ago, my husband and I had a plan to come to Milan for the Scala. And 2 weeks before the trip, my husband suffered a brain stroke. So we couldn't come. We never come. So it's a special moment for me being here, because I am having the thought and emotion of my husband being here that it's noticed. And it's hard for him to travel. But, okay. Thank you so much. Okay. I'm here to talk about mindfulness and language and the impact of understanding that kind of behaviors from a behavioral perspective in what we know now as the behavioral contextual science. So mindfulness, as you all know, it's a very old practice, and it's connected to all traditions as meditation. It's like being in the present moment, accepting or just being in the present of whatever is feeling or is thinking or in memories on the movement we can do, and just like being very conscious about our behavior. So it's in Kabat-Zinn words, it's that, and you can read without me reading. It has proved effective as a technique and as a philosophy of life. It is becoming popular and popular. It is becoming a very frequent activity in many areas, in clinicians, politicians, physicians, in the health area, in many, many areas. So it's like it's spreading very quickly, and it's becoming a central role in human behavior. So there are a lot of it's for children, for adolescents, not for dogs, not for cats, but just for human beings. And say it's connected to yoga and meditation, and it has increased the interest in knowing not only its impact, but in what are the processes involved. So it is related to many names as decoupling, perspective taking, metacognition, deliteralization, distancing, diffusion, self as contents, observation, lot and lot. In those technical theorems, we have also the area of diffusion, of course, it's like spewing things around, spewing having thoughts, emotions, spewing noticing things around, and spewing me, noticing things occurring inside my skin, my thoughts, sensations, my doing, when behaving, being public or privately, it doesn't. Oh, sorry. Excuse me. Experiencing me noticing that I'm noticing, and experiencing me noticing that I can notice, experiencing me making choices, doing just enough in the right moment when I'm doing something I have chosen to do, and just excuse me, it's a new thing, and I don't follow very much the instructions. So, okay. So, it's effective in many domains. Has been proved to enhance attention and cognitive performance, improving emotional and behavioral regulation, reducing a wide range of psychological symptoms, improving health by changing even some biological markers. So it's seen and effective. It's been expanding, will be more and more expanding, so it's here, and it's here to stay. So the questions arise, and what are the components, when it's working and when it's not, and why? So there are thousands of studies in the mindfulness area from many perspectives. There are many practices. The basic one is the breathing exercise, the scan body exercise, and had been analyzed according to their purpose, according to the number of practice, focus attention, open monitoring, compassion, meditation. It's short versus frequent practitioners. It's being in a formal way or being informal as a way of doing in life. Has been analyzed the components in a very formal way. For example, it is observing, it is the practice of the exercise involved describing, it involves words related to not judging inner experience or no reactivity to inner experience. If the targets are to observe, or to notice things outside or things inside. So there are a lot of studies trying to analyze and differentiate the effect because of the formal characteristics. The conclusions have to be taken lightly in general, mostly because the studies are correlational studies. But beside that, what happened is that, what has been found is that awareness of the present moment and the not being validating or not being valorating, not doing judgment about the thought or the feeling or whatever is occurring right now, is being as the core elements. Focus attention and loud practice also have been found as the core factors. However, any of these studies go into the processes of mindfulness in a functional way. I mean, it's not what is that behavior and in what way we can approach. So that's the reason why, in my opinion, we'll need behavioral science, just because doing mindfulness or meditation is just a way of behavior. It's a behavior. Mindfulness is a class of behaving. It's a class of behaving done of multiple discriminations. It's like an opera. It's different responses, but all of them are under the same function. What behavior is a particular way of interacting with the own behavior. So we are the only animals who have learned to respond to the own behavior in a conscious way, according to what we know. So we are responding to what own behavior? Any behavior. So the movement, my doing, my feeling now, my thought now, my looking at you now, whatever, and I can see. It's not working? Now, here? Okay. Any of the behavior I'm doing now, I can be the observer of my behavior. So this is great. So for thousands of years, not only our ancestors that developed that kind of behavior, probably because just interacting with the own behavior permit that we are here, permit our ancestors to develop or to survive in a particular environment, to have children, and just to develop barriers, to develop behavior to confront the adverse contingencies that they had. So it's a very explicit and a very special behavior that is developed for granted. So the behavior to which we are interacting is our own behavior. So it's like I can see that, and I can see that, but also I can notice my own behavior as being the observer. So that is really incredible. The people who had many persons who had been interested in human behavior, even before psychology was developed, has always pointing to what is. Thank you. What is how is that? And what what is the laws that establish that we can respond to our behavior? So how is that one behavior impacts another behavior? So we are in the frontier. And many years, the people have been thinking about how is that. Descartes going to this area, doing in not a good way, because put psychology in a dualistic position to understand that's behavior, not only my thought and my feeling, but how my thought and my feeling can have control over my acting. So the relation between one behavior and another has been the focus of many, many people. However, it is recently when we are beginning to understand how is that interaction and how can this interaction be effective and when it's not effective. So in somehow this is related to that. So what is important? We humans, as I say, have emotions, thoughts, memories, and all of us know ideas about the past, the future, about ourselves, and how we interact with all of it. We follow rules, and we develop rules about many of these things. So we need to know how the rules are developed, how we follow them, how that is the same that to say how we interact with our own behavior. So that's the reason why science is a friend to be with, because might give us a better way to understand what during thousands of years has not been understood in a way that must be effective. Contextual behavioral science, I will not be going into this because I know that yesterday Steve was going. It's a contextual, functional, philosophical, experimental, and applied approach to human behavior. It's not the philosophy, it's not the basic, it's not the applied, it's all together. I used like a tree to use as a metaphor to explain of this. And we are on the shoulders of experimental basis that is in a continuum developed with a specific purpose. There is a compromise to basic research. I will go now to this. And there are implications in many areas, and it's connected to many other sciences, especially biological. This is the tree. It's like to understand behavior or any things that we do. In my history has been effective to use that kind of metaphor. The root is, the philosophy is like the perspective that guides us to go into the lab or to go into any applied setting. It's a way of looking at behavior that is monist, that is functional, that is contextual. So we look at the behavior as a whole in interaction, in context. The trunk is, as we all know maybe, not all philosophies are the same. There are philosophies who are effective, and there are philosophies which are not effective for developing knowing that could be applied. In that sense, radical behaviorism and functional contextualism, that are two ways of looking at the behavior that have the same function, different ways of talking, but it's the same core, have developed a lot of information in experimental work that has permitted us to know in the impact of contingencies on behavior, how is the relation of the behavior on the context, and also has permitted to develop, not very far away, also not yesterday, has developed a way to do research, to do experimental work in the behavior that is more human, that is language. So the trunk has grown up because of the experimental work, but this experimental work is connected to a way of doing things. But it's not the experimental work done without any impact in application, but it's all together. So any experiment has to be connected to applied dimension. So if we look at the branches, we see that knowing about contingencies and knowing about language, how the contingency changes because we learn to relate, so has an impact in understanding and has improved our protocols or our way of working in many areas, in policy, in therapy, in healthy, in business, in education, and so on. So in many areas. So it's completely different, in my humble opinion, just to look only to the branches without connecting to the trunk and doing experiments without a good being in the domain of a perspective or a philosophy. So it's all together. So the root and the trunk, I will not be explaining too much about, but it's giving us the conditions under which human behavior develops and is influenced. So behavior is anything we do. It's only present. The act is in context. The context is the antecedent context, the response, the consequence context. It's like ABC, and I used to say tick-tack. Tick-tack. Tick-tack is like the tick. It's like we always are responding to the function of whatever is occurring, and the tack is how we interact. When we respond, there are consequences that have some functions and become like a new tick, and then we respond with a tag. So that is tick-tack, tick-tack, tick-tack. That used to be at the same time that's the biological tick-tack, tick-tack, tick-tack. The point is that how we learn to respond the tag, how we learn to respond to the tick, to our thought, to our feelings, that occurrence when we are living in the world according to our history. So just tick-tack, tick-tack. Any tick-tack that is not going anywhere, it's like putting our energy in nothing. And if we learn to understand much more about human behavior, we will be in a position to do the task that could be more effective for not wasting our energy in, I would say, stupid things. So a contextual approach, as a behavioral approach, the causes of behavior are in the history and in the present context. That is what we need to look. And that gave us the possibility to know a lot about contingencies of reinforcement, and later has prepared the way to understand language as relating behavior. So we know now a lot about all these things. Language as relating, as derived relational responding. It's like responding to an event in terms of another's. It's like as soon as I learn to relate in terms, for example, of opposition, I can understand when someone say that Milan is opposite to Madrid in a particular function. For example, has better operas. In that way, it would be comparison instead opposition. But I can understand is opposed in other things that I cannot imagine right now. No. Or it could be comparison in that Milan has better operas than in Madrid. You know. Then I had not been in Milan, I can think about coming to Milan instead of going to Madrid just without being any time in Milan, okay? So someone say that feeling guilty is something that you have to fight because it's not good for living, feeling guilty. So when I feel guilty, I'm going to fight with my guilt. I'm going to put guilty out of my life because it has been established in a relation with opposition, with living, with acting for whatever. So it's going to give me a function to feeling guilty, even nobody has applied any specific contingencies for me to put away guilty. It's the same, say, if you've had doubts, the relationship is not going. So it's like for a relationship being okay, for an intimate relation being okay, you cannot have any doubt about the relation. So when you one morning get up and have some doubt, you began to worry about your doubt, and you began to interact with your worries in a particular way that you are using your energy in worrying about something that you could be interact in other way. It's completely different if you are raised in a way where feeling doubts is established in a relation of inclusion, of integration. I mean, sometimes, and humans, for the way that our ancestor has developed, we are a type of monkeys, we are a type of humans, of animals, who doubt could be so up. But having doubt is not against doing things. Could be integrated. And I can behave or I can continue my relationship even having doubt and see and track the behavior and left the contingencies occurring so that to make choices. So there are most of the things when we are languages, when we learn to relate and the contingencies change. I like very much one example, and I don't know if I have time, but I will put here. Just imagine another lesson, hormones, and he's a person who like very much when leaving home, just being close to his mother, and he had his mother. And when he left home for going to the school, he do that. The mother and him just had something else and feel okay. However, this boy, we are going to name him Luis. He's beginning to fall in love with someone in the school. He's beginning to feel something. And the girl in the recette look at Luis and say, I don't like, she doesn't know anything about Luis, but she say, I don't like boys who used to be close to his mothers. Okay? And also, just let's think that Luis loved to do math. But this girl say, and I don't like also that boy who are all the time studying and all the time focusing in that kind of thing. So when Luis is listening that kind of thing, something is occurring to him. It's like Luis recognized him as someone who liked math and also who be with his mother. And so just listening to that kind of thing is like, if I feel that, if I do that, it's like no girl, okay? So when this boy, when Luis is coming home, and when his mother opened the door and want to do the same thing as every day, what happened to Luis? Will be Luis hanging or no. He will do it like, no, mommy, no, leave me alone. And what about when he began to study in that moment math? If studying that is like being in a position in that moment that he is feeling something about this woman, it's like, if I feel that, it's no girl. Maybe he can quit for a while to do math. So I mean, there are thousands of examples where just because we learn to relate, things change. And we don't need like an extinction process, or we don't need a particular condition and process in order to many things around have some functions. So there are many things that without being in touch with can have appetitive function, can have aversive function, and may have that myafting towards appetitive or just away from the aversive functions. So being, learning to relate gives us a tool. It's like a behavior impressive because change can be contextualized in a way, and things can be contextualized in a way because we relate that change the function. That's the reason why human behavior is sometimes has a lot of variability, produce a lot, and generate thought, generate feelings, generate a lot of things without any people around could be controlling what is happening. So language is just learning to relate, and the relational that has been typical is like equivalence. Things are as, things are opposite. It's comparison, more, less. It's like here, there is spatial, it's now, it's then, before and after. Is hierarchy. I mean, it's the things, the part and the whole. It's like belonging to, it's like a member of. Is dialectic. When we say dialectic, is the perspective of the speaker, is the perspective of the person behavior. Could be interpersonal, like me and other, here, there, before and after. So all these things together. So because of that, because we learn to relate, emerge what we will be calling like coherence. It's like we began to behave in a way that makes us feel in a particular way, just because it's cohering with our history of contingencies and relating events. And that cohering gives us, well, peace somehow. And when we feel incoherence, we try to do anything to compact things to be coherent. So a lot of thought, sensations, and action will emerge without explicit contingencies. So I will not be going more about that, that's all. This is important, and especially important for the topic that I'm having today, that is because we interact with the own behavior. For interacting with the own behavior, the relational behavior that is more important, considering that all of them are involved, is the perspective or the dialectic framing and the hierarchical. When we say that, it's just, it's me, you, it's here, there, and it's now then. And it's like me with my behavior. So in order to notice my behavior, I need to have learned to frame in perspective. I mean, I'm here and I can see my behavior there, even being part of me. So the way to interact with my behavior, if I learn to be fluency in hierarchical framing and dialectic framing, I could be able to notice my behavior and to feel, to experience the coherence of that behavior, my thought, my feeling, being in that moment part of me. Maybe later it's gone and will be another. And I can be noticing one thing, noticing my sensation here, in my life, in my voice, my thought, and just feeling that I feel that kind of experience and that I can behave and I can make choices according to the functions that are present in the right now. Okay? So if we look at that, the consequence of being fluency in doing, because it's an experience of me here and my behavior there being here, okay? And we go to the hierarchical framing that is a consequence. So I could be, that's its words, but any of these things has to do with words. It's an experience, okay? So it's hard to talk about mindfulness or to talk about discriminating my own behavior with words, because it's not words, it's an experience, it's an ability, it's something that I do, okay? It's something that I feel. And but in words could be like, I am not my thought, I'm more than my thought, this thought belongs to me now, I contain my thought, I'm more in that moment, this is part of me now. Okay? So in order to go there, we need the perspective, we need the dialectic. So we are now in the position to understand much more about how to discriminate my own behavior, how to be effective in interacting with my own behavior. So, studies on the fusion. Acceptance and commitment therapy has, this is a word, the fusion is not a technical term, but has been analyzed from a relational perspective. And we began that kind of studies long ago, but now it has been more than one, and we try to compare the dialectic or the perspective taking and the hierarchical. And in all the studies, we use multiple sample training, like it's like to do like a training for with many examples for experience, me and experience sensations, neutral sensations, whatever, and then experience feelings or thought that have appetitive or had aversive function. So when we are talking about multiple sample training, we're not talking about one single sample, but just a lot of the samples. And that will make sense with other studies done in the mindfulness area, where say that just the people who, or the person who do mindfulness but not frequently is not as good as the person who do mindfulness frequently, like a lifestyle. So we just did different experiments. In this case was the first one, and it was very good, and it was much better. It was adolescent, athlete, and changed problematic behavior, and it was much better when we add the hierarchical framing than when we use only the dialectic. So we were into that area in order to understand how we interact with our feelings, our thought. This is part of the protocol, but could be done in many different ways. It's like notice it, see if you can give shape. Sometimes in order to increase that we can see the thought, it's important to try or to see the emotion. It's important that that thought become like having a form or writing, and the emotion having like a color, or as it was a color. So we use many things in order to increase the likelihood of being me and being in the context of noticing my thought, in order my thought would not be here but just be there. Okay? So this is the standing. This has been standing in a number of studies that I can give you one later. So we did not only with adolescents at risk, but also with, in this case with problematic, in other cases was focusing in emotions and how emotion was changed when they were framing in dialectic versus in hierarchy. And also in pain, using being the tolerance to pain, that is much more than just saying if emotion is changing or is up or is down. And also we have the last one study, that is a thesis, and we began to deconstruct and to differentiate much more the components of the hierarchical and the dialectic. So, it's a line of research. And now we go to the area of mindfulness. Mindfulness is a sequence of discrimination of the own behavior. It involves sequence like tick-tack, tick-tack, tick-tack. It's breathing, for example, take the breathing exercise. It's breathing, then it's noticing whatever is showing up, then moving attention to whatever other is showing up right there, and so on. So it's a sequence of attentive behaviors, 24 of the stimuli present, in and out, inside the skin. And sometimes, depending on the exercise, has like cues for moving the attention to the person who is doing the behavior, who is noticing. Exactly. So now we are in the context of training a particular way of interacting with their own behavior. And it's just discrimination training. So we just did some experiments trying to know what is in the breathing exercise, to know if it had something to do with the diffusion procedures or the diffusion components. So we analyze the exercise, and we take out components, like some of the components who were more related to the hierarchical, and to add components that integrate the experience. That's what we did. And what happened, just taking out and adding components, is that when we add like meaning to the act of doing the exercise, when we add more refocusing, more coming back to the breathing and the person who is noticing somewhere, when we add more hierarchical cues in the context of the perspective-taking cues, the effect increases. Okay? And that makes sense with the other one. So what does it mean? The diffusion experiments has been replicated in different labs, different tasks, and different participants. And the core interactions with the own behavior is just dialectic and hierarchical, and integrating the regulatory functions and integrating noticing chosen actions. So when we add even more discrimination, more noticing, even the chosen increase. So we are in a position to increase much more effective way of interacting with the own behavior. The mindful experiments, on the other hand, are just from the beginning. I mean the experimental one, not the correlational ones. No? And the replication and much more control is needed. No? However, the core interactions seem to be the same. It's noticing, it's refocusing, integrating, and giving meaning according. So, same processes. So It's like an integration of different ways of doing the discrimination of their own behavior. Could be mindfulness, could be diffusion, could be any other practice. But the point is just looking at the processes instead as the names. In my opinion, it's a very good starting point. So there are names, many ways of doing, but the same processes. So I think that is a good news for understanding and for influencing on variability. And good news for a long problem in human behavior, in just trying to understand what is the processes involved in relating my behavior in a coordination way. Is just only my thought is here and I don't move here. So it's like everything is here. It's very complicated and I'm in a trap. However, if I learn to be here and move my thought or my feelings or my emotions there, part of me now, I am in a position to be more open for the functions that are related to me in a coherent way, show up and behave accordingly. When doing that, it's like me and my behavior and how I interact and tracking the consequences. Science is clarifying, behavioral science is clarifying the process of the emergence of the own behavior, of thought, emotion, just because we relate thousands of thought could be present if I learn to relate very frequently in perspective taking. I could be a lot of things, for example, about my past could be present all the time and staying with the future. Well, anyway, we have the tools for understanding why new thoughts are here and how we learn to ruminate, even how we learn to interact with my thought that could be not affected. It's clarifying the forces involved in that way of interacting with their behavior, and it's related directly with flexibility and inflexibility responding. I would say here only about flexibility, because inflexibility has to do with a lack of fluency, a lack of ability to frame my behavior in perspective or in dialectic, in hierarchical. And contrary, flexibility in the technical theories, like noticing their behavior while doing chosen action. However, technically, according to a relational perspective, psychological flexibility, we have been defined as responding to the own behavior, as I said to you today, by framing hierarchical with the dialectic I, to contact of mental or meaningful values. So I see that this point might be the context for integrating different practices. I would want to end that we were in that position because we were in the shoulders of giant, insightful Skinner say and talk about private events and what developed in that moment. And he says something about self-knowledge as being aware of their own behavior that puts the person in a better position to make choices. That's what he said, but in that moment, we couldn't understand how to do that. Were in a position to understand how we interact with their own behavior. Sid Biyu used to say and developed procedures for establishing complex discrimination, simple and complex discrimination. Some of you who had followed the behavioral literature will know a lot about how Sid Biyu put all this stuff in order to understand and in order to establish the condition for discrimination. So I remember he telling me that in the 80s that we knew a lot about contingencies and we had to go to develop better procedures to understand complex discrimination. I think that the relational area, the research that we have done in language as relational behavior, as relational framing, is like a very big avenue to put all these things together and to generate, well, what we call behavioral science, like a big avenue to understand interacting with their behavior and to put together many traditions and many things. So I think that behavior is not so complex, but depending on the focus, depending on the perspective, you look at the behavior, you generate chaos. Chaos? So if we look at behavior in a functional way, we will see that behavior is not so complex. Has a lot of variability. Einstein used to say that psychology was the most difficult science, even more than physics. It's amazing. And he said that because of the variability of the behavior. However, if we look at behavior in a functional way, things become less complex. And that's happened when we began to study contingencies, and that's happened now when we began to study language in a relational way. That's permit us to understand much more about how we develop thousands of thoughts, of emotions, and how we relate to them. So that was the point. And I would say that mindfulness is spreading, but is subject to experimental analysis. And when we do that, we realize that there are same processes in many things that we are doing and are affected. That's all. Thank you.